We have Brent Auvermann from he's the Center Director at Texas A&M AgriLife Research Center in Amarillo, and he's going to be presenting here. I do want to quickly mention we have a slight delay in our 3:30 keynote speaker, so we're going to be swapping out and taking our break after this talk rather than in an hour from now. So just know that we're taking our break at 3 o'clock after this presentation. Let's give Brent a warm welcome.
Green is forward.
That's correct. This is
That's the
laser if you need it.
great. Thanks. Thanks very much for the invitation to be here. Just so you know, when I just checked the temperature in my hometown of Amarillo, Texas, it was 78. Yeah. Sorry to bring that bad news to you, but I'm going home to something really nice and pleasant. I just want to talk for just a couple of minutes about irrigation technology, but really you're going to find very quickly here that it's really not about technology at all. 2015 Farm Bill, somewhere in there, USDA set aside some money for a Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research, FFAR. FFAR in 2018 then stood up as one of its major projects, a multi-state consortium that we'll call for today the IIC, the Irrigation Innovation Consortium. It was focused primarily on developing what we called white space technologies, technologies that are not proprietary, but that on the theory that a rising tide lifts all boats, you generate some good science that benefits everybody, and then let the market go to work on designing implementations of technologies that are predicated on the data and the findings of those white space developments. So FFAR in the DC area, University of Nebraska, where the N stands for knowledge, as you know, Kansas State up in Manhattan, Colorado State is the headquarters for the IIC. We got the Bulldogs out at Fresno State, and then Texas A&M AgriLife Research in Amarillo, those 5 institutions playing ball with FFAR, again, to develop white space technologies to the extent we're able. So landscapes and production agriculture and good science, that's really those are the cornerstones. Since 2018, we've funded about over 50 projects by the time the money runs out, 10 million, half of which came from FFAR. The rest of it was matched on at least a 1-to-1 basis by non-federal sources. So as you can see, the projects here are going to average on somewhere between $150,000 to $200,000 each, making investments in the development of innovative approaches to irrigation. The 3 strategies. The first one is widgets. And as an agricultural engineer, I have lived and died on widgets. Widgets are what make the world go round. Widgets are in my pocket. Better, simpler, more sophisticated machines is what we're talking about here. That's one of the strategies. You can see here a cheap soil water sensor. You can see agrivoltaics, or you can see here injectable nitrogen production on site using solar energy. We need to provide reactive nitrogen to these plants to help them grow. What if we could use solar energy to do it on site and then inject it straight into an irrigation system? This is the kind of thing that we were trying to sponsor, the development of these technologies and put them in the hands of either licensees to take them to market or others who could take the next step in refining the design. Second, we wanted to go beyond widgets to kind of an Uber widget, so to speak, systems integration and decision support tools. And no doubt a lot of you have heard about those kinds of things. Anything that has a dashboard on it with alarms and so forth is trying to get you to do something with the data that you're seeing or the information that's been converted from data into information for your consumption. These decision support tools take a lot of different forms, but By and large, what they involve is a bunch of sensors out there that are getting cheaper and better all the time, cheaper, better, more reliable, generating more and more useful data with more and more sophisticated algorithms. Yes, think artificial intelligence, deep learning, neural networks, and so forth, converting all of those data points into something that you and I can use as what I would call actionable intelligence. That's what we want to provide to ourselves through these systems. So this would be the systems integration and decision support tools that integrate sensors, algorithms, research, and user interface technologies into something you and I can use and actually make useful decisions concerning. Let me give you an example of this one. This one's really illustrative, I think. We had two different sets of technologies here. One developed in Nebraska, one developed in Bushland, Texas, which is 11 miles west of Amarillo. We put them competing against each other and against what I'll call business as usual. And when you see the BAU acronym on the next slide, just understand that that's business as usual, not using these advanced intelligence-enhanced systems powered by sensor technology and smart algorithms and so forth. Business as usual just means doing it the way we've done it and trying to make sure that we make a buck. So these two against each other, smart number one, smart number two versus business as usual versus not using any irrigation water whatsoever. And you can probably guess where that fourth option went. So smart versus BAU irrigation scheduling. The technologies used are things that you're likely familiar with: infrared thermometers, soil water sensors, weather stations, feedback algorithms, satellites, models, widgets of all kinds, and then integrative tools like stress indices. How do you take all of these data and convert them into a number that means something on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 100? So those kinds of things are the technologies embedded in those two smart intelligent irrigation scheduling systems. What were the findings? First of all, looking at maize and soybean, no yield differences between the two. In fact, no yield differences between the smart technologies and the business as usual. But guess what? The smart systems halved water use on average. The maximum irrigation water productivity, by which we mean pounds of stuff grown per inch of water pumped, per acre, however you want to say it, was 50% of the full. That is, in the smart irrigation systems, we were able to generate essentially twice as much useful stuff per unit of water pumped than the business as usual. And it was less effective in wet years. So hopefully some of you just went, duh. Irrigation is not nearly so important in wet years. So we need these things to work at their best in the drier years, and then, in fact, they do. So take-home message number one for all of us is that more crop for drop is alive and well. You heard Cody talk about the breeding pipeline for improved cultivars of this, that, and the other. We're growing, instead of the grasses that we tend to like in our landscapes in Amarillo, we've demonstrated we use fescue in landscapes out there, cool season grass. We're now demonstrating out at Bushland zoysia grass that can be just as pretty with the fine texture and the great foot feel, nice dense turf grass using just about half the water of the fescue. So yeah, there's plenty of room in R&D, both private and public-private partnerships. There's plenty of room for additional R&D in irrigation technologies, both widgets and decision support tools. So my first message is keep them coming. We still want to invest in those things, both the private and the public sectors. But 1865, we're still trying to figure out how not to keep killing each other. President Lincoln finally led us to it. At the time we're trying to figure all of that out, William Stanley Jevons in England is figuring out something very important about their coal reserves. And that is, as their machines that burn coal got more and more efficient, they were extracting more and more coal, not less and less. And we call that now the Jevons paradox. The efficiency of the widget went up, and the extraction of the resource went up. What the hell is going on? Well, fast forward to 2014. Does efficient irrigation technology lead to reduced groundwater extraction? Empirical evidence. Anybody want to guess what they found? As we get more efficient in our irrigation systems with these fantastic widgets and decision support tools, what happened to our aquifer extraction? Up or down? Up, you're exactly right. I led you there by the nose, but you came through in the clutch, right? Very good. We have empirical evidence. Now, that can't go on forever, obviously. You drive the resource to zero, there's nothing left to pump, pumping goes to zero. But the intermediate term, we accelerate in some cases when the emphasis on technology itself is too great. It's easy, really, if you want to sit down and diagram it. I do this kind of stuff on the airplane. It's part of the curse of being a pointy-headed engineer, trying to figure out how to apply systems dynamics thinking. But it's really simple when you boil it down. If you look at the red one, it says potentially irrigable acres. These are acres that used to be productive. They're no longer productive, but by golly, if I could grow a crop on 2 gallons per minute per acre rather than the 2.5 I've been banking on, whoa, that land suddenly comes back into production. Same thing happens with your workstation. How much faster is your CPU than your CPU 10 years ago? It's 10, 100, maybe 1,000 times faster. And how long does it take to boot up? About the same amount of time as it did 10 years ago. Why? Because we're asking more of the resources that have been liberated by the increase in technological efficiency. That's really all this diagram says. Now, of course, this diagram is embedded in a much larger web of causality. This is not the only feedback loop going on, but it is one that's important and that shows up empirically in our measurements, whether it be coal in England, peak oil here, or non-recharging groundwater resources. So, take-home message number 2, let's keep our eye on the ball. What is the key to extracting less? Anybody got it? Extracting less. Duh. I appreciate you being willing to say it because that really is the truth. The eye on the ball is reduced extraction, not just increased efficiency. Now, can we get to extracting less with increased efficiency? Yes, if. And that's the rest of my remarks, and I'll be done and out of your way. Take-home message number 3, and you've heard it implicitly and even explicitly in our panel and in the technology discussion about the mesonet. The human agent is the key. The human agent is the key. We've got to be innovating not only around widgets and decision support systems, but around the full range of incentives and constraints that are at play. So, if you try to adopt the position of a farmer, I've got to repay the banker. Is this technology worth the risk? What if it doesn't work? I'm spending money to implement it. I'm taking that out of my grandkids' inheritance. Wait a minute, is that ENSO forecast that's telling me it's going to be is that reliable? How in the world do I use this widget and not trip over myself in doing so? And I've got to compete with my neighbors. What if they're not using this technology and they're able to produce a bumper crop in a high price year and I'm not? What am I going to tell my banker? Can I trust the technology? So the IIC's strategies have grown to include something I'm calling here just beyond widgets and dashboards. Competitions, incentives, side-by-side learning, the kinds of things that we don't extract from Ronald Reagan's old dictum. If it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. If it stops moving, subsidize it. You remember that? Those are the 3 tools in the old toolkit. It's time for us to expand our horizons a bit about co-opting the human agent into groups who voluntarily come to certain conclusions about what needs to happen to the resource upon which their livelihoods depend. So one of these is Testing Ag Performance Solutions, TAPS, developed first at the University of Knowledge in Lincoln, Nebraska. A brilliant agricultural engineer, extension engineer came up with this competition. The competitors pony up a little bit, push a few shekels to the middle of the table, and then they're given an opportunity to select to make their decisions about growing a crop. And this agricultural engineer puts those decisions into play on a field, replicated so that we get variances and all kind of publishable quality data. And we allow these teams to compete with one another. They choose things like their insurance plan, their inputs, their seed, their irrigation strategy. They react in real time, quasi-real time, to weather conditions and so forth. And then we watch it play out under a real center pivot. That, to me, was such an exciting idea, and it's expanding into other states. And what we do here now is measure not by yield. It used to be all about yield. We now know it's about profit, not about yield. And so we're measuring crop per drop, not crop per se. Secondly, and this was pioneered up in the North Plains Groundwater Conservation District. Steve Walthour is here, one of his brainchilds up there, started there and is expanding to Oklahoma and Colorado. The idea here is to bring people together, bring irrigators together, let them learn from one another, bring in some experts, but maybe don't trust the experts so much. Maybe enter into dialogue with the experts about what they know and then challenge them on how well they know what they know and challenge them on how sure they are it's going to pay off. Exploring new technologies, in some case earning preference points for cost share programs and so forth. These are the kinds of things we want to see expanded because we want irrigators to have the opportunity to innovate on their own using one another as a community of practice. And so I want to salute the master irrigators in and around Dumas, Texas, the northern Texas Panhandle, and IIC is trying to move this into other parts of the United States. So take-home message number 4, leverage great ideas and don't care who came up with them. Give them credit, but then let's move on. We've got to incentivize innovation in every realm, not just the widgets, not just the dashboards, but policy. And I've got down here in the lower right-hand corner, oh boy, here he comes down Central Texas to talk about Kansas again. Well, look, I'm an engineer. I look skeptically at some claims. When we see people actually extracting less out of the aquifer over time, I think, well, how much were they pumping to begin with? By damn, if I'm pumping 100 gallons per minute per acre, I can sure cut that down to 50. No problem. It's time to lay that kind of thing aside and embrace what's behind what Kansas has done with their local enhanced management areas, LEMAs. They're getting together as geographical groups, voluntary associations, essentially asking for permission to form this association and then putting restrictions on themselves and figuring out whether it works. Some of them have, some of them need some refinement. But the point here is that in Kansas, there has been space provided for innovation in the policy realm as it relates to voluntary associations. And that would be my message to the districts here. Box out under the rim as much as you can to create space for your growers to innovate. And that would be message number 4. Again, it falls into that category of human agency is the key. Technology by itself can't get us where we want to go. So, Irrigation Innovation Consortium, we're trying to shape the future of how we irrigate. We're about to run out of money, but we're going to end up taking the next steps in some different funding sources and so forth. I'll stop there and see if there's any questions, or I'll get out of your way.
Does anyone have any questions for? Come over to you, bring the microphone.
Thanks a lot. I'd like to hear you speak. It's just a correction. The Master Irrigator program was Danny Krinke's
Way to go, Danny.
brainchild.
All right,
over there.
Danny. We'll give credit to where it's due. Thank you, Steve.
Oh, yeah, and he said I was supposed to tell you that it's being funded by the Water Development Board.
When you were talking about the intelligent irrigation, the very first part of your presentation, you didn't mention anything about that. You said that it have the use of the water for the same production, but you didn't mention anything about the economics of that.
Yeah. Well, so those things always pencil out in a particular year related to the market conditions and so forth. To an engineer, yield is not relevant. Yield per unit of input is relevant. So I'm just speaking in terms of just overall gross efficiency. The programs themselves also they provide awards to the winners in several categories, one of which is profit, projected profit.
Have you seen any issues with technology not having access to the internet in some areas?
You know, wireless broadband or just broadband generally is kind of the default assumption for these smart systems, right? So part of getting there, part of enabling humans to take advantage of opportunities like this is making sure the infrastructure is there. I take that to be behind your question, and I really don't have any comment other than to say, yes, you're right.
Other questions for Brent?
I think I've taken too much of your time.
Wonderful. Let's give him a
All right,
round of
thank you.
applause.